In this video, you're going to learn how you can lead worship for the very first time. If you've never done it before, I'm going to take you through the complete process from beginning to end, not so that you can just get up on stage and play a few songs on Sunday, but so that you are actually able to confidently lead as much as possible for your first time on Sunday. So let's walk through the entire process together. Now, before we jump into things, I want to make sure that you don't miss any of the steps in this process. I've simplified this process down as much as I possibly can. In future videos, I'm planning on going more in depth in each of these steps to help you lead well, but I just want to give you the quick start guide. So each of these steps is very important and I don't want you to miss them. So make sure to download down in the description below the worship leading checklist, your first time leading worship. I want you to have that checklist and follow it step by step so that when you lead on Sunday, you'll have everything that you need to lead confidently. Now that you've downloaded it, let's get into it and follow it step by step, and I'll talk you through each step so that you can lead this coming Sunday. So somebody asked you to lead worship this Sunday. Where do you even start? What do you do? Well, this is the very first thing, the very first step in the process. This is what I want you to do first before you do all other things, and that is check with your pastor about what they're preaching on. That is the first step because that answer is going to guide everything that we're about to do. Obviously, when we're leading worship, we're talking about leading musical worship. So yes, we're going to pick some songs out. But if we want to lead worship well for our first time, then we want to make sure that the songs that we pick support what our pastor is teaching on. So right now, send an email to your pastor. Text them, say, hey, I'm starting to get ready for preparing for worship for this weekend, and I would love to pick songs that tie in to whatever you're preaching on. So do you have a direction for this Sunday? And then hopefully, if they're an awesome pastor, they'll give you an answer back, right? So that is where we must start because everything that we're about to do after this flows from that answer. Now, I say that with caution because I know sometimes pastors don't get worship leaders what they're preaching on, and they pick it out on Saturday night. So let me rephrase that. Ideally, everything that we do should flow from that information that we get from our pastor, but if you don't get that information before you lead worship, then I'm still going to give you what you need to lead as confidently as you can, but make every effort that you can to get what your pastor is preaching on so that that can inform the next steps that we're about to take. All right, on to step number 2, and this is the part where you were probably expecting me to start, and that is we've got to pick out songs, right? We're leading musical worship, so we've got to pick songs to lead. So what songs are we going to lead? That is the question that we need to answer. And here is the system that I want you to follow in order to pick out songs for this coming Sunday whenever you're leading worship, whenever it is. First, we need to determine how many songs do we need. So that involves thinking about your service. I assume you've attended your church before if you're leading at your church, so you know the typical order. Maybe things change a little bit from week to week, but typically in a church setting, the service order is fairly stationary. So think about what a quote-unquote normal Sunday looks like at your church in terms of worship music, and think how many songs do people usually do. Now, if you're leading in a different environment and somebody told you you've got 30 minutes to lead worship or 20 minutes to lead worship, I think a good baseline for you is to take that amount of time that you have and divide it by 5, because worship songs are about 5 minutes long, especially if you're playing them for the first time. If you're leading worship for the first time, you're going to be doing 20-minute spontaneous worship sets, right? Because you're not used to that, so you're just going to play the song, and that's okay for our first time, right? So typically a worship song is about 5 minutes long on average. Some are going to be a little shorter, some are going to be a little longer, but it'll be somewhere in that range. So I always plan, if I've got, let's say I have a half an hour for music, then I would pick 6 songs. If somebody says, hey, you have 20 minutes for worship, then divide 20 by 5 and you get 4 songs. And there you have it. That is how many songs that you need. Now, from there, let's go back to I'm leading in church on Sunday, that example. Now we need to write down what the structure of our service is, because we don't want to start from just this blank slate where, okay, I just need to pick 5 songs. No, we want to have an order that we plug songs into. And this is something, as you lead worship more often, you'll find what that order is for you and your church and how you typically do it. But here is how I do it. So I'll start off by writing out my complete service structure. So at my church, for example, we open with a song. So I write song. And then we do another song. So I write song. And then song number 3, song. And then sometimes we'll have somebody come up and do a prayer / a welcome / a giving moment. So I will write that down, hosting moment or prayer and giving. And then after that, we do another song before the message. So I write song down. And then after that, we have the pastor come up and they preach for 30-35 minutes. So I'll write sermon or message there. And then we always close with a song. So song at the end, and then we do a closing at the end of our service where somebody will wrap up whatever we learned about and send people out and let them know that the service is over. So let's talk about that order again. And you think about this in your own context of wherever you're leading. Probably if you're leading at a church, you have a typical order of worship that you follow. We've got, for me, we have a song, another song, prayer / giving moment, another song, sermon, final song. So all in all, I need 5 songs. And now I'm not just picking random songs and whatever I feel like. Now I'm like, okay, I know where these songs need to go in the order of the service, and I have the template of my service that I'm following. And I'm just going to plug the songs that I want into each of those spots. Now, that's the next step, all right? We've got the template. Now we need to pick the actual songs, right? So what songs are you going to lead this Sunday? Well, if it's your first time, I want you to pick the most popular songs that your church knows and loves. All right? This isn't a time for you to be like, I really like this song and I want to introduce it to my church. Like introducing a new song to your church, unless you have to and your church hasn't had a worship leader before, you don't have any structure in place, as much as possible, pick songs that they know, because that's only going to help you lead worship better, because you're going to learn as you lead worship more that leading worship isn't just getting up in front of your church and playing songs. We're leading the people. That is like 75% of what we're doing. So if we can pick songs that people already know, then they can sing along with us. And then it makes our job easier, because maybe you could just start a song and step back from the microphone and you wouldn't even need to sing it, right? So we want to pick the most popular songs. So I want you to think in your head about your church and think, what are the top 5 songs that my church sings right now? What are the songs that I'm like, yep, people know that song. If I led that, they would be able to sing it instantly. I wouldn't have to teach them apart. Go ahead and make a list of the top 5 songs in your church right now, and those will become the songs that you're going to lead, depending on how many songs you need in your specific environment. Now, if you're leading outside of a church environment and you're somewhere else and you don't know the people that you're leading, but somebody asked you to lead worship for the first time, stick with what are the most popular songs like on Christian radio, or what are you can go to CCLI Top 100 or Praise Charts, trending songs. I'll link both of those things down in the description below. Just look at the most popular songs. Chances are you probably already have an idea of what popular worship songs are, because you are becoming a worship leader, so you probably know a little bit about worship music at least, right? So just pick popular songs, because that's going to make your job so much easier. Once you lead worship more and more, you can introduce new songs, and I encourage introducing new songs. But for now, we need to pick songs that people know. So what are the top 5 most popular songs in your church right now that you think, if I did these on Sunday, people would know them and they could sing along? Now, we've got the order of our service. We've got the top 5 songs. let's think about how we're going to structure those songs in our service. It's typical to start your service out with a fast song. And as we go through this process of preparing to lead worship, I just want to make it as simple as possible. We're going to go for the default. This is like what you normally do whenever you lead worship. So we typically start with a fast song. We go to still, it could be a fast song, but a slightly slower song. Leading into the message, we typically bring things down to a slower, reflective song. And then the song out of the message is a response song to whatever our pastor just preached on. So I want you to think about, you have that structure in front of you. Think about how that ties into the structure of what you do. So let's say you have 3 songs in your service. The first one, or 3 songs at the beginning of your service. The first one is going to be a fast song. So out of those top 5, plug the fastest one in spot number 1. Number 2, it can really be any song. It can be a fast song. It can be a medium tempo song. Plug one of those from your top 5 list in that. And number 3, as you head into the message, pick the slow reflective song on your list of top 5 songs. And then, and this is why we wanted to know what our pastor was preaching about, as we come out of the sermon, we want to be responding to what the pastor taught on. So now you can think about songs outside of those top 5 songs, but songs that your church has done before. Think about, what is my pastor preaching on, and what would make sense to sing about coming out of this message. And this is where you're going to take your worship leading from somebody who led worship for the first time and they just picked a bunch of random songs to actually leading your church. So this step is really important. So for instance, let me give you an example. This Sunday, my pastor is preaching about thankfulness. And that's basically all I have. We're talking about like being thankful for your church and being a part of a church, but basically the general theme is thankfulness. You don't have to have much from your pastor. They don't have to send you their whole sermon. You just need the topic, and then you run with that. So in my mind, as I'm picking songs out for this Sunday, I'm thinking, okay, what songs have to do with thankfulness? What songs does my church know that have to do with thankfulness? And as I was looking through my list, it was kind of hard because I don't have a ton of songs that are specifically about thankfulness, and you might find that in your list of songs as well, but do the best you can. Don't just think of the title of the song, but think of the lyrics of the song. And so for this Sunday, I landed on 10,000 Reasons. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. You know the song 10,000 Reasons. Still my soul will sing your praise unending, 10,000 reasons, whatever the lyrics are, you know what I'm talking about. There's 10,000 reasons to praise God, basically. That is speaking of being thankful for God. So that's what I picked coming out of this sermon. Do you see the relation? My pastor is going to be talking about thankfulness. How are people going to respond to that message? Well, we want them to express their gratitude and thankfulness to God, so we're going to sing 10,000 reasons, because we have 10,000 reasons or a million reasons to thank God for all that he's done. Do you see the connection? So, what is your pastor preaching on? What song that your church already knows ties into that? That is how we're going to pick songs. So, to recap that step, and I spent the longest amount of time on this step because it sort of forms the foundation for everything that you're going to do. We asked our pastor what they're preaching on right now so that we can be prepared to lead that song out of the message, or if you don't do a song out of the message, going into the message, you can still tie that song going into the message into what your pastor is preaching on. That'll work nicely as well. So we've sent a message to our pastor. Hopefully they've responded. And then after that, we've set out the template for our church service, the standard template. Song, 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 giving moment, song, message, song. And then we started to fill in those spots. Song number 1, fast song. Song number 2 could be any song, but a medium tempo or fast song typically. Song number 3 could be any song for me in my service. Number 4 is a slow, reflective song as we head into the message. And then number 5 is that response song. For me, it's going to be 10,000 Reasons, because that ties into what my pastor is preaching about on Sunday. So go through that process for you and your service, or whatever context you're leading. And remember, if you aren't leading in a church service and you have 30 minutes to lead worship, plan on each song being 5 minutes long and go from there. So that was step number 2, and I spent a lot of time there because that forms the foundation of what we're about to do as we actually go through the process of leading worship. We haven't led worship, we've just picked a song. So let's move on to the next step. On to step number 3, now that we have our songs picked out, when you get up on stage or in front of your church or wherever you're at, you aren't just going to play a song and then stop, and then play a song and then stop. So we have to figure out how we're going to transition between those songs. And this is really important, because if you don't do this, it's going to feel really awkward whenever you lead worship in front of your church and you play the first song and you've never practiced how to get from the first song to the second song. And so we need to have a plan for those in-between moments, and it's probably okay to just stop and start, but we want to think through these transitions, and not just in terms of how you're going to get from song to song, but how you're going to get from element of whatever service part you're in to the song and back and forth again. So let's take a look at that service order that I had again. All right, we've got a song, we've got another song, we've got another song, we've got prayer/giving, we've got another song, we've got the sermon, and then we have the final song. So we've got the bones of what we need in our service, but how are we going to get in between those different songs and the order, the elements of our service? So let's think it through. The service is going to start off, and we're going to play a song. Nothing else is happening before that opening song. So how am I going to lead in that moment? How am I going to get into the first song? Well, think through what it looks like on a Sunday morning when you lead your church. Even if you've never done it before, picture it in your head. What do people typically do? Well, we want them to stand up and we want them to sing with us. So maybe you have a countdown at your church and it hits 0, and then the lights come up on stage or the lights go down in the room, or however you signal that worship is starting in your church. Think about that moment. And then you're probably going to want to invite people to stand up and sing with you. So the transition to get into the first song would be, hey, welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here with us today. Would you stand and sing with us? That is a perfectly fine transition for the first time you lead worship. Good morning, everybody. We're glad you're with us here at church today. Stand and sing with us. And then you go into the first song. So that's an example of a transition. That's a speaking transition. Now, let's think through some other transitions that we could do. We could not speak between our songs, and if we want those to flow, those transitions to flow, we might put songs in a similar key, if it works. You don't have to do this for the first time that you're leading worship, but this is sort of a intermediate worship leading tip, is to put songs in the same key. So if you can fit the first 2 songs in the key of E and they can be sung comfortably in those 2 keys, then go with that. Because then you can end the song, first song, and then you can go right into the second song, and it won't be like this jarring transition because you switch from the key of E to the key of F, which is a half step higher, which would be kind of annoying for people. So think about those transitions between your songs, how you're going to get into the first song, typically, is what we want to do. And then think about maybe any other special elements in your service. For example, I'm thinking of that giving/prayer moment in my service, and there's a song after that. What do I need to do after that moment to get into the next song? Well, in my head, I'm thinking through, okay, somebody just spoke for like 3-4 minutes, and they prayed. Do I even need a transition to get into the next song? No, because they serve as that transition to get into the song. So think through the flow and the order of your service like that, and that'll inform your transitions. one last transition to think about, and that is if you have a song after your message. What needs to happen after the message so that you can lead your people well? Picture it in your head, all right, where you've got that order written out with our songs picked out and the other elements in our service. Picture the next transition out of the message into the final song in your head. What's going to happen? The pastor's going to start wrapping up their message. Hopefully you'll be making your way on stage. You'll coordinate with them in advance. Say, like, what's the last point of your message? When can I come up? And you're going to plug in your instrument. We'll talk about this more in a second. Plug in your instrument, tune up as they're finishing, and then they're going to pray, and then they're going to step off stage, and it's going to be you. Now, what are the people in the congregation doing? They're all sitting down during the message. So we want them probably to stand again, and we want them to sing with us, but they're not just singing the song with us for the sake of singing the song with us. They are responding to what the pastor just preached about. And so we can use that language to transition back into musical worship. So it could be something as simple as this. Let's stand and respond together. After your pastor steps away from the mic or off the stage, let's stand and respond together. That tells people to stand, and you're responding to what they just heard. That could be the simplest transition that you could do. If you're feeling a little bit more bold in that moment, you can tack on some truth. Remember, we picked this final song coming out of the message with the message in mind, so they should tie in together. So you can make your church aware of that, and all you would have to say is, let's stand and respond together, remembering that there is so much to be thankful for today. That would be like an example of what I would say this Sunday, because my pastor is preaching about thankfulness, and we're going to sing about thankfulness. So there is your transition. Maybe at the end you need to wrap up the service. That could be done with a prayer, and you end the prayer and say, and all God's people said, Amen, and then your service is over. So I hope that gave you some insight into thinking about, we aren't just picking songs, but we're also thinking about how we're going to get in between those songs. And there's two main things to think about. Think about your song keys, the key that you put your song in, and think about what you need to say and how you need to direct people as you lead worship throughout your service. So now we have a plan. Where do we go from here? Do we just show up on Sunday and then kind of work our way through the plan? No, we need to practice, right? We need to rehearse. And this takes two forms, once again, because it might just be you leading worship, and we'll talk about that, but it might be you and a team leading worship. Do you have other people leading with you? Well, simply put, if you do, then you need to rehearse with them. So what does that look like? Well, if you have other people leading with you, number one, you need to send out that song list to the people that you're leading with. Send them a text, an email, whatever it is. Let them know what songs you're going to be leading on Sunday, and hopefully you've done this like a week in advance, ideally, but maybe more than that. If you're just putting this together at the last minute, I guess do the best you can with what you've got. You should be practicing before the service at least, but try to pick a night during the week to get together at your church where you're actually going to be leading worship, if at all possible, and run through the songs together. So you send them the list, and then you're going to run through the songs at your worship rehearsal. So you need to have a worship rehearsal. What does that look like? How do you lead a worship rehearsal? Just very quickly, open with prayer, and then run through your songs, and then end with prayer. And it's going to be a messy process if you've never done it before, but you will eventually figure out the flow of how your worship rehearsals work. Now, what if you're leading by yourself? Well, you still need to rehearse. And when I say rehearse, this is different than practicing, all right? This isn't just learning your music so that you know how to play the songs. We want to actually be able to lead the songs and not just be fumbling our way through our music. And so put in the time beforehand to, yes, learn your songs musically. I think that's a given. But then whenever you rehearse, that means running through your set list from start to finish, just like you would whenever you lead on Sunday morning. From start to finish, just like you would on Sunday morning. So I spent a lot of this video so far talking about that first part of planning your service, and we thought through all the little individual steps. So hopefully you have a plan for each of those steps now. Now we want to put it into practice. And so for the first song, we play the first song, but then we don't stop and flip our music and check our phone and pick up a phone call or whatever. No, we play the first song. We can even practice that, welcoming people into the space. Hey, good morning, church. We're so glad you're here today. Let's stand and worship together. Do that, and then go right into your first song. And then after your first song is over, picture like you would be if you were leading during your service, and go into the second song as quickly as possible. And maybe between the second song and the third song, you have a speaking transition. Practice that speaking transition. And then go into your third song. And then think, okay, there's going to be a giving/prayer moment here. And so I can sort of take a break and breathe. And then I'm into the fourth song. And then my pastor is going to come up and preach. And then how am I going to get back into worship? And you practice all of those steps just like you would on a Sunday morning. And if at all possible, do this in the space that you're going to be leading worship in, with the setup that you're going to be leading worship in, because it's much better to figure these things out during the week before you actually lead than like on Sunday morning if you're running through the songs before you lead on Sunday morning. Or it's better to figure all of that out before you step on stage, and then you're like just trying to figure it out in the moment. So rehearse. Don't just play through your songs. Yes, you need to know your songs musically, but actually rehearse the process of going through the order of your service. We are getting so close to actually leading worship. Let's talk about the day of. What do you do on the day of leading worship? It's Sunday. The time has come. What are you going to do? Number one, you show up early. You always show up early to lead worship. We aren't showing up 5 minutes before the service starts, right? Decide what's appropriate for you and your team. I know different churches have different schedules. Maybe you've got multiple services. Whatever it is, you should give yourself probably an hour and a half before the service, depending on how many songs you're doing, because especially this first time, you're going to want to run through your set list again. So do the math. You know, if your service starts at 10 a.m., how long does it take to get set up and run through your songs and then have like 30 minutes before people start coming in? You know, it's probably like an 8:30 run through, right? If you plan on you and your team being at church at 8:30, you run through your 5 songs. It'll probably take like a half an hour-ish. And then you end your run through at 9. Pray with your team. Then there's a 15-minute gap in case any surprises come up. And then you have a half an hour to just be before your service. We don't want to be rushing into these things and like showing up 5 minutes before and figuring out that nothing works. So get there as early as you can, as that makes sense for you and your church. That's what you need to be doing on the day of. Show up early and run through your songs again. Make sure everything is working. Now, let's talk about what you do during the service. We finally got to the meat and potatoes. What do you do during the service? The time has finally come. The countdown is at 1 minute, and your service is about to start. What do we do? Well, luckily, because you followed this process so far that I've laid out for you, you don't have to worry because you're ready. You can relax. Now, you might be a little bit nervous for the first time that you lead worship or the first couple times that you lead worship, but you can honestly relax because you've thought through every possibility, everything that you need to lead worship. And just remember this, what you're about to do isn't about getting in front of your church and playing music. You are leading the people of your church. Right? You aren't performing for the people of your church. There's no pressure on you to sound like the original recording. You are getting up in front of your church and you are leading them. And you are exactly who God wants leading in this moment because the opportunity has been presented to you. So lead with that confidence in mind. Are things going to go perfectly? They might not. But are lives going to be changed and affected? Yes, because it's not dependent on you playing the song perfectly. It's dependent on the Spirit of God working. So I tell you that because I want you to keep that in mind as you lead worship. Think, this is not about me. This is about our church worshiping together, and that's why we picked songs that our church knew. So it wasn't just, hey, I'm up here playing my 5 favorite worship songs. You guys have no idea what they are, but I'm going to play them anyways. All right? The way we've picked songs have combated against this performance aspect of leading worship. We aren't performing, we're leading worship. Now, let's get into the practicals now that we've laid the foundation. On the morning that you're there, like I said, we want to be on stage like probably 5 minutes before our service starts, after we've already done the run through for the morning. But once that countdown goes up, if you have a countdown at your church, or just 5 minutes before your church starts, be on stage and be ready to go. Get your guitar plugged in, tune your guitar, make sure you're all set. And 5 minutes will give you enough time to do that, all right? It doesn't take a ton of time to get set up on stage, but we want to be in place and ready to go. We don't want to be like, oh no, there's 30 seconds left and I need to run up on stage, or you just start your service late. No, just be on time. Be 5 minutes early, actually. Don't be on time, be 5 minutes early. And be set up and ready to go. And then what do? Well, you work the plan. We have a plan, right? You've practiced this. You are ready for it. You know how you're getting in between your different sections of your service. So what do? We start off, hey, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's good to see you. Would you stand and sing with us? And then you go into your first song. And then you work through your service outline, whatever it is, and then maybe you pray as your pastor comes on stage. And what do you do whenever you do that? Whenever your pastor comes on stage, how do we transition off of the stage during the service? Well, we're going to quickly and confidently exit the stage. So that looks like bending down and unplugging your instrument. If you're leading from acoustic guitar, quick tip for you, always unplug from the direct box first, never from your guitar first. Always unplug from the direct box, the thing on the ground, never from directly out of your guitar, because if you unplug from your guitar, you'll get this loud pop in the sound system. So keep that in mind as you lead this Sunday. But you unplug, direct box first, then unplug your instrument, put your guitar on the guitar stand, confidently walk off stage. I know it feels awkward the first time you do this and you're moving while other things are going on stage, but it's not awkward. You're just transitioning off stage. So then you go sit in your congregation with the rest of your church. And then you get back up on stage. If you're lucky, your pastor will have told you a point in their sermon where you can start to transition up on stage. And remember, we do this confidently, all right? You're not interrupting your pastor on stage. You are walking confidently up on stage. You want to minimize yourself as much as possible so you aren't a distraction, you know? We aren't like running up on stage. We're just slowly, confidently walking up on stage. This is my time to get back up on stage. My pastor's about to finish their sermon. And then you plug your guitar in. And this time we do it backwards. We plug the instrument cable into our guitar first and then into the direct box. Keep that in mind. When you unplug, you do the direct box first and then out of your guitar, but whenever we plug back in, we plug our guitar in first and then into the direct box. Keep that in mind, or you'll get a loud pop if the sound person has you unmuted. And then stand there and wait patiently for your pastor to finish their sermon. And then what do? We go through what we've already planned. Let's stand and respond together. And you finish that last song, and maybe you pray at the end and say, and all God's people said, Amen. And then congratulations, you have led worship for your first time. So I tried to squeeze as much in there as I possibly could. I could have made this really dumbed down, and then I feel like I would have skipped parts, and you wouldn't have been prepared to lead worship confidently as you could. So I included just the necessities. Those are just the necessities, but I want to make sure that you don't miss out on any of those steps. So make sure down in the description below to get the Beginners Worship Leaders checklist linked down in the description below. That'll walk you through that process. It would be a more concise version with some tips along the way to help you pick out songs, navigate transitions, think about how you're going to lead your team maybe, and then what you're going to do on the morning of. So follow that checklist, and you will be ready as you can be to lead worship for your very first time. Listen, I just want to encourage you again. You got this. It's always fun to lead worship, all right? It's a privilege. It's not about you. It's about leading the people of your church. You aren't performing. You are leading them in worship, and they should be singing louder than you are, so you aren't performing for them. All right, you got this. You're going to do an amazing job as you lead worship for the very first time. If you have any questions about any part of this process, let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Or if you have any questions and you want to see a more detailed video on any of the things that I talked about in this video, let me know in the comments below. And other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, you got this. Lead worship well.